I'm here with Courtney Tritch with the Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership. And Courtney, I appreciate your meeting with me here because I had a few questions about your program here, this Our Study. How did this idea come about to create a program called Our Study? What is that about?
Well, the Our Story project actually came about because there were several regional leaders that went to Cincinnati 2 years ago, and they saw the way that city and that region had united around some common messaging to come up with a brand, if you will, for their region, so that everyone was on the same page, everyone was telling the same story about who and what they were, and it was really effective from a marketing strategy standpoint. And so our leaders went and saw that and came back and said, hey, we got to do that here in Northeast Indiana, and the Our Story project was born.
So what was the purpose of it? I mean, why?
The purpose of it is to come up with common messaging for the region, so that whether you are a for-profit business or you're an economic development or you're a chamber of commerce or a visitors bureau, you can articulate what Northeast Indiana is and who we want to be, so that, like, if you think about a larger city like New York or Las Vegas or something, you have a very specific idea in your mind about the culture that is there and who they are and what they're all about. But when people think about Northeast Indiana, they're kind of like, it's this kind of, you know, amorphous blob that no one really knows what it stands for. And so we wanted to correct that, and we wanted to find some common storylines that anyone could use that would be compelling in telling the story of our region to attract talent and to attract businesses.
But how do you do that?
Well, it was a long process. We contracted with 2 consultants, and we used this process that they'd been developing for about 10 years. And so we went out and had 3-hour workshops in all 10 counties. We had 23 workshops altogether. And then we had an online workshop available also. So all told, we had 856 voices weigh in from around the region, saying, answering questions in workshops about what words describe Northeast Indiana, what type of personality does Northeast Indiana have, answering questions that showed a sliding scale of, okay, who are we now, but who do we really want to be, where do you wish we were on this scale, so that we could really define the personality of the region, and then, as I mentioned, 5 key storylines that we could all use in marketing Northeast Indiana.
But as you do this, how do you ensure a diverse intellectual base, you know, from this area? You know, how did you do that, you know, as you did your groundwork?
Well, we did a lot with the media. So we had partners in radio, in TV, in print media, in all 10, well, most of the 10 counties, as we tried to notify people about this project that we were doing. We also have a vast stakeholder database that we were constantly sending out emails and trying to get them to invite other people as well. And we noticed that we had 2 sets of workshops, and the first set of workshops was well attended, and people were so excited about it that we actually had higher attendance for the second set of workshops because people liked the process, liked where it was going, and wanted to be a part of it.
I mean, it's like this corner of the state here. As a kid, as I was heading towards Michigan a lot, we would drive through Amish area. Mm-hmm. So were you able to incorporate all the way from the Amish or all the groups, you know, that have, I mean, when you go to the Grable area, all the horse and buggies, you know, that it would seem like that you'll get one type of feedback from that area versus an urban area like Fort Wayne.
Right, yeah, and we tried to incorporate as many voices as we could. So we did actually have 2 workshops in LaGrange. We had one in LaGrange and one in Chipshawana to try to incorporate those voices. And then, for example, in Fort Wayne, we reached out. We had a couple of Burmese refugees actually participate in the workshops, and they liked being involved in it. In Noble County, we had some high school students come out as well because we wanted the younger voices represented. So we really tried to get as many people who were willing to spend 3 hours out of their day, which is, you know, a big commitment, to get those voices heard.
Curious, now how did you do with the Hispanic and AfricanAmerican communities? because I haven't found that many African Americans here that have heard much about this this project.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was one of the things that came out of the Our Story project, was this need for more inclusion. I would say that it was definitely not as well represented as it could have been, and I don't know if it is that they felt like they couldn't be at the table, or they weren't invited personally, as opposed to seeing it on TV and they felt it wasn't something for them to weigh in on. I'm not sure what the obstacle was, and I'd love to find out more, because I want to overcome that obstacle for future projects. But one of the major outcomes of the whole project and process was, how can we as a region be more inclusive? And I think that that is highlighted in what you were just saying, that we need to do more of that. And how do we do more of that? How do we make sure everyone feels welcome at the table for community projects like this?
So your results, your final results of today are still going to be evolving then?
Yes, so we had, there were 5 key outcomes of the project itself, and one was that, for example, we know who we are regardless of which of the 10 counties you reside in. We know there was great consistency in the results, but one of the great consistencies in the results was this concept of inclusion, and whether we are or whether we're not. There was a traits exercise where people got to list words that described us, and then everyone got one blue Death Star that they could put on a word that they wanted to challenge, that that's not who we are, even if it's something we wanted to be, but it's not who we are now. And there was great challenge whenever the word inclusiveness came up. And so that was something we really wanted to highlight in the report, that, hey, people see that we can do more in this area, and then what does that mean, and how can we be more inclusive?
Because I know the Fort Wayne school system is really, that's one of their issues too, because we have some of the, at least a few years back, one of the schools here in Fort Wayne was one of the most diverse in America. Mm-hmm. And we have a real broad ethnic base here, but then a lot of those people won't know much about the history, so to speak, of Northeast Indiana.
Right.
You know, how, you know, given that history isn't taught like it used to be as much in detail, amongst the people that you're surveying, how do you ensure that they know what they're talking about, or that they know anything about their area? I mean, what do you go by?
Well, our organization's main role is a marketing organization to market Northeast Indiana to the world. So, so educating the actual residents about that might not necessarily be directly in our wheelhouse.
No, I mean educating. I mean the people that you talk to, the people that participate in the survey itself. Mm-hmm. How do you ensure that they, I don't want to say that they know what they're talking about, but
right,
that they have really something to bring to the table?
Well, I think that we wanted everyone at the table, so we didn't just want people who were highly educated or something at the table. I think by virtue of living in Northeast Indiana, you kind of are an expert on Northeast Indiana, not by specifically, you know, facts of how we came to be, but about how do you feel as a resident this area. You can feel culture, you can feel what's accepted and what isn't, and you personally will have your own opinion on where you want to see this region go in the future. And so I think that was what we were really interested in from that personality standpoint. But you're right, there is a rich cultural history, and we have actually been becoming increasingly diverse. I was just doing some research the other day, tangentially to this, where in the last 10 years, I think our Hispanic population has grown around 40%. And the Asian population, I think, has grown something like 75% in the last 10 years. So to me, that's really exciting, because you can also look at various studies that show that the more culturally diverse your community is and the more inclusive your community is, the greater impact that has from an economic development standpoint. So you'll see higher per capita GDP, and you'll see more young people being attracted to that area. So when you look at it through the economic development lens, which is what our organization does, from a talent attraction standpoint and a business attraction standpoint, that's exactly what I'd like to see happen.
Now, you know, as you do this, now do you work in conjunction with other organizations downtown, or do you just do your own thing and try to sway their views to adopt your views?
We actually work with dozens of organizations. So since we represent a 10-county region, for this project, our story project, we worked with the local economic developers in each county, the chambers of commerce in each county, the convention and visitors bureaus in each county, and then we also work with groups on a regional level as well. So for example, there's a regional chamber of commerce that handles advocacy. We work very closely with them. We've been instrumental in creating the Mayors and Commissioners Caucus, which is all the mayors and commissioners get together on a monthly basis and meet about what they can agree on so that they can speak with one voice at the state level. So there are myriad of groups that we work with and are funded by, so that we want to make sure we include all those voices at the table.
You know, as you've been going through this whole process here, what has happened that really just blew your mind that you didn't expect to see?
Well, I hate to be redundant, but I have to say that this inclusive thing was really amazing to me, because it wasn't just about race, and people came up to me after every workshop and told me their stories, and some were brave enough to even tell their stories in the workshops and say things like, for example, there was one gentleman who put the blue Death Star on the word traditional. There's a lot of concern about the word traditional. Is that good? Is that bad in our community? And how do we capitalize on all the good things that it means, that we're rich in history and our heritage and whatnot, but that it doesn't also incur the negative connotations of the word, which is that we're slow to change and, you know, we're not accepting of new ideas and that thing. And so this gentleman put this blue star on that word, and so when asked why, he stood up and said, because I'm worried that when you say the word traditional, you mean you're not going to accept me and my partner. You know, he was a gay professional that came to our workshop, and he was like, hey, are you going to be inclusive of me too? And I had people that were just transplants to the area who just had, you know, grew up somewhere else, came here, and they were like, you know, once people break into the community, they're welcomed, but there's kind of a period of time before you get your membership card. And so there were a lot of people telling me their stories about how just because they were never born here, they were kind of kept on the outside. And that's an issue. And these are people that are very involved in the community and still felt that way. And so the more and more of those stories I heard, the more I was just like, okay, this is a much broader issue that I think we need to be thinking about, because we pride ourselves on being a friendly, welcoming Midwestern community, and that does exist. But there's this other component that I really think we need to bring to light.
Yeah, that's what you just said there. That's the tradition.
Yeah.
The tradition, depending on when you look at the tradition, you're going to be getting different types of views about people. And as we evolve over time, you know, that's it. I mean, that's an interesting study that, you know, that you're doing, because it doesn't have a bottom to it. You can keep digging, but do you reference the way things were, or do you just want to create just a new perspective, period, and just go with that?
Well, so what do you mean exactly? Do I reference it in what way? Like, what would be an example?
For example, once upon a time, right in this community here, we had sundown communities. You know, where anybody who had a hue to their skin, black or Hispanic, whatever, had to be out of town before the sun went down. And during that time period, their feeling of tolerance wasn't like today. So if you get them answering certain questions, you know, you'll get a different response than someone who's newly here.
Well, so my view from this, just from a marketing perspective, is that I would like to highlight the diversity of our community in a positive light. I think that, and I think we probably differ a little bit on this, but I think that when you show inclusiveness or diversity as a problem, not as many people will listen.
Oh no, I don't mean as a problem, just as part of what you're. But I think you already answered that when you said that your process is evolving.
Yes, and to be fair, this whole concept of inclusivity, that was not the intent of this project. It was to come up with a common branding message to move out to the country, to move out internationally, to attract talent and business here. Mm-hmm. So this was like just this side undercurrent that has just really taken my interest, because I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And I think that the way to do it, rather than showing, hey, you used to treat this group of people really badly, are you familiar with the history of that? That to me feels like an accusation and immediately shuts the conversation down. Whereas I can say, hey, do you know this gentleman Eric? He has done all these amazing things. He's done all these shows. He's done all this writing. Look what he has contributed to our community. Now that creates a connection rather than a divide. And so that's what I'm looking to do. And so I'm, for example, was meeting with John, the president of the Black Chamber of Commerce, the other day. And I was asking him, I said, I think that's amazing that we have this Black Chamber of Commerce, and they're doing awesome things. I don't know if you're familiar with what all they're doing, but I said, how can we not just operate as Greater Fort Wayne, which is the Chamber of Commerce for Fort Wayne, and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Black Chamber of Commerce, how can we start doing things together so that we can not just grow next to each other, but grow together? And so that we feels more like one community. And so he said, actually, we're already in the talks about having a networking event with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so I think it's breaking down the walls and finding our commonality that will move us forward.
I think it's more than that. I think just with the fact of you doing this, because you don't have that coming from downtown Fort Wayne normally, where downtown Fort Wayne is reaching out to do this. It's usually the other independent communities who are reaching up, suggesting that this be done.
Sure.
But with you reaching out to do this, perhaps that might take things forward. And so, where are you right now, and what are you going to be doing next to carry this movement forward?
Well, right now I'm in the process of, as I would phrase it, just starting the conversation. I don't pretend to know all the answers or even some of the answers. But with the Our Story Project, there's a lot of really good stuff in here that we can be using to market our community, and I want to make people aware of that. While I'm making them aware of that, I also want to mention this inclusivity concept and how can we move that ball forward. Because just in the last few weeks, I've made new connections because I have this as a platform to start conversations with people. And now, for example, we're hiring a new position here, and I'm able to contact those people and say, hey, I'm looking for a more diverse candidate pool that we don't normally get when we get applications. How can you help me do that? And so just starting to kind of open the door a little bit with different people, different groups, different organizations. And one of the next projects that I'm hoping to look at is 21 Alive has been a great partner with us, and they are looking at doing a new I think it will be every other week series highlighting diversity in our community. And so I think if we just start having these conversations, little thoughts and little ideas will percolate up, and then before you know it, hopefully we'll have a snowball on our hands.
Well, it sounds interesting. I appreciate your taking some time out. So perhaps we can talk in the future when you're at the next stage and trying to make this more getting more people involved. And it sounds interesting. Northeast Indiana, I know it has a ton of history here, all types of people, all types of cultures and traditions.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of immigrants from African countries here, you know. So again, thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing more about this.
Sounds good.
And thank you.